So it's that time of the year again. The Champions League starts next week, so with that, we're here to give our group stage predictions. Now, obviously, Harry, this year the format is slightly different, so we can't really predict the knockout stages yet because we have no idea who's actually going to be there. We can run through our full 18-team league phase. So we're going to start with the bottom six, and we'll rattle through these as a group of six. Do you want to tell me, Harry, who do you think will finish in the bottom six of the Champions League league phase?
Yeah, I think the bottom six are going to be pretty similar across everyone's predictions. But for my bottom six, I have gone 18th OH Leuven, 17th SKN St Pölten, 16th Paris FC, 15th FC Twente, 14th Benfica, and 13th PSG.
Well, I think the big talking point there is who you put 13th. PSG not making even the knockout playoff rounds. Semi-finalists from 2 years ago, that would be one hell of... And obviously didn't make the competition last year, though. That would be one hell of a drop-off. Why do you think they'll be 13?
Well, it's a difficult one because, as you say, their performances in the Champions League have been so hit and miss. You know, obviously, a best of being runners-up, twice now, semi-finalists 2 years ago, but they failed to even reach the group stages last campaign. So it's really hard to work out where they're going to sit. And although I don't think their fixtures are the most difficult in the tournament, they've got some difficult ties, and it's one of those where I think they will fail to pick up points against the big sides, which in turn puts pressure on their games against the pot 2 and pot 3 teams. And then suddenly I think that, you get surprised in one of those matches and you find yourselves out. The reason I put them 13th is because I think it will be tight. It's that kind of scenario where they could be in the playoffs for 5 game weeks, but in the last game week fall out of it and end up not making the knockout. So I think it will be touch and go. It will be tight between the sides above them, but I look at their fixtures, I look at their performance in Europe. It's very hit and miss, and I think this year will be another miss. And I don't know. I think we're going to get a shock. Someone big will drop out of this league table. For me, I've gone for PSG.
Yeah, I think we're always going to see someone drop out. PSG weren't particularly impressive against Lyon, losing 6-1 the other evening, but I still feel that is somewhat harsh. Another interesting one, Paris FC down in 16th. Not a fan of the Division 1 clubs.
Yeah, again, this was a bit of a strange one because they have done okay over the last couple of years, and they have, they're a side who, for me, have always done pretty well on the European stage, but again, I just haven't been massively impressed. I think that obviously through qualification they only had to play one game and they beat Austria Vienna over 2 legs, and again that was a game that they did well in, don't get me wrong, but it's a game we expect them to win, and then it all comes down to fixtures as well and timing. I think timing is going to be key, and we'll see that going through the predictions, and we'll see that once the tournament kicks off, is that timing with the league phase, based on when you play who, is going to be absolutely crucial, because if you get a good run and then you play the big sides, it might not matter if you lose to those bigger sides because you start off with a nicer run at the start and you'll get points on the board. But if you start with some tough games, or if you lose your first couple matches, it can put you in a difficult position. So yeah, I've put Paris FC to be down there. I just think they'll struggle to get results. It's a very competitive Champions League, and I like an upset. I like to see some of the smaller sides get through and maybe put on some good performances. But again, I think it'll be tight. I have put them a little lower in 16th, but yeah, I'm not expecting too much from them.
Fair enough. As for my predictions, I've got in 18th place OH Leuven, 17th place SKN St Pölten, in 16th place FC Twente, 15th SL Benfica, 14th Vålerenga, and 13th Paris FC. So similar sorts of clubs down there. I do think Paris FC will be a lot stronger. I think they'll be right on the verge of that knockout playoff round. I think it's quite a boring prediction, putting a lot of these are pot 3 sides and the weaker teams in the competition, apart from Manchester United, who I've got a little bit higher. But as boring as that is, I think that does show the gulf at the moment, at least in my thinking, between where the pot 1 and 2 teams sit and then the back half of pot 2 and then moving into pot 3. That I think there is a little bit of a distance there, and I think we've seen that in recent editions of the Champions League. I mean, you've got clubs like SK and St Pölten who were beaten quite heavily last year in the Champions League group stage, and I think this year I don't expect it to be any different. I think the fact these sides will play other pot 3 teams is beneficial, but the problem for them this year is that Manchester United are in there as well, and obviously two of these teams have got Manchester United, and that will be a lot more difficult. So I think it's going to be interesting. Yeah, I think Paris FC will be right on the cusp. I wouldn't be surprised if they were the ones that snuck in. I think Valerenga are a team who could be very competitive, and I think Benfica and Twente are both decent sides as well. But Twente, another one who we saw in the Champions League last year, and they weren't particularly impressive, especially against those pot one sides. So yeah, it's difficult. I want to see these teams make that jump and get into the next round, but I just think it's going to be quite difficult. But yeah, I haven't predicted a single upset there, and I'd be very surprised if there wasn't an upset. So yeah, potentially there will be a slight difference there, but yeah, based on expectations, that's probably where it should lie. So moving in then to the knockout playoff round. Do you want to start, Harry, with your team in 12th place, right on the cusp, but just making it through?
Yeah, 12th I've got sneaking through is Valerenga, and again this is a bit of a weird one with PSG not being in the playoffs, but I think I was impressed with what they did last year. I thought that it's one of those where, again, I mentioned the run and how if you can get points on the board early or get some good results, you put yourself in a good position. And I think it's one of those where they'll just keep themselves alive until those last couple of games, and then try and get themselves through with some big results. I thought they did very well last season to put on some decent performances, and yes, they did get smashed around a bit, but they came in and they put on some decent results. They drew to Bayern Munich. That was a brilliant draw. That was the only draw out of all the matches in the group stage. I thought was a fascinating stat when I found that out. But yeah, they were part of the only draw against a very, very good Bayern Munich side. So they've definitely got the potential to put some points on the board against the bigger side. And if they do that, then all they've got to do is beat the sides that are in pot 3 or are in pot 2, and then they put themselves in a good position. So for me, I think I think they will sneak through. They had a pretty easy run through the qualifying, so that doesn't really put much into it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who you play in qualifying. We know from the last few years that those qualifying games can be tough. We've seen that Man United and Arsenal were caught out by that too. A couple of years back. So it's one of those where qualifying is always difficult no matter who you play. Yes, they did play Helsinki, Slavia Praha, and Ferencvaros, but overall, I you have to get through those games. They are pretty tough games. They can get caught out in them. They manage to navigate them. And for me, I think they'll get the business done and they'll sneak through. It's going to be like goal difference or by a point. But I think they'll be 12th, and I think they'll be into the knockouts, which will be very, very historic for them.
I think Valerenga are definitely one of the sides who could pull off a bit of an upset. So yeah, fair enough. In 12th place, I've got Atletico Madrid. They've started well in the Liga F this campaign, but I think in terms of their quality coming forward, I think they're going to struggle to find goals against those top sides, but I think they'll be comfortable enough against those weaker teams in the competition to get results over the line. But yeah, I think what we've seen in previous editions is, do they have that quality to beat those top teams? Probably not, so that's going to be quite difficult for them. But yeah, I don't think they're too bad a team. I think they've got United as well, which is the toughest of the pot 3 sides, which will be difficult, but yeah, I think they've got enough to get through, but it's going to be tight, and I think they'll be right on the bubble. They're potentially dropping out Paris FC or Valerenga, taking advantage of that and getting in there. So, yeah, 12th place, I've got Atletico Madrid.
On to 11th then, and here I put Juventus. I think this one, Juventus are always a hard one because I think that you never really know what you're going to get with them. So I've just put them in the middle of the row here. I think they'll get through. Again, I think it'll be pretty tight. It'll be touch and go and very, very close between them, Valerenga, PSG, Benfica, you name it. But they'll also be 1 or 2 points off jumping forward a few places. So a bit middle of the road, a decent outcome. I think Juventus are one of those sides where, with the quality they've got, they'll beat the sides they're meant to beat, but they'll also lose to the bigger sides. So I think they'll probably, I'm expecting their results to be pretty even, some narrow losses, some narrow wins, and just keep the points ticking over, which is what you have to do in a group stage. But yeah, they're one of those sides where they're not quite in that top bracket, but they're also not, they're a pretty decent side, so they are in that kind of, a decent middle ground. So 11th, I think, is a very generic place to put them, and I think they will end up getting through to the knockouts. How well they do, we'll see. But yeah, 11th for Juventus.
Yeah, fair enough. 11th place, I've got a bit of an upset, but I've put VfL at Wolfsburg. Quite low in this table, I'll admit, but I look at their fixtures and I'm not sure how many games they're going to be able to dominate. I don't think they'll win either of their pot 1 games. I think the only way they win that is because they've got Chelsea in their last game. If Chelsea are comfortably through and Wolfsburg are right on the bubble, as I expect they'll be, then they may need to win that game, and in which case potentially we'll see a Chelsea side who are taking it easy against a Wolfsburg side who have that desperation to win. then I think we could see Wolfsburg win that game. But I could see Wolfsburg being somewhere like 8th in the table, knowing that they can't get knocked out. And then in that last game of the campaign, where perhaps Chelsea are on the bubble to get into the top 4, Chelsea could win that. So I expect that's probably how it's going to look. So it's not necessarily that Wolfsburg will be terrible, but I think they'll probably lose both their pot 1 games. I think they'll probably lose or draw to Manchester United. I think that'll be a really difficult game. Of course, they could win it. They've got the quality, but I think their side has looked a little weaker than it was last season. And yeah, I don't know. I think Wolfsburg are a very good side, but I think they'll struggle against those top teams and potentially drop a little bit lower. But I think it's so tight between 12th to 5th that anyone could really be anywhere. It's going to come down to those couple of points. It's going to come down to goal difference. So I don't necessarily think they're going to have a terrible tournament. I just think they'll struggle a little bit in the group stage because they've got some tough games.
Into the top 10 then, and in 10th, I have put AS Roma. Again, I think similar thinking to what I've done with Juventus. It's another side from the Serie A Femeni that aren't one of the best in the competition, but they've got some decent quality. They looked okay. You know, they did well to navigate the qualifiers. Again, they'll beat they'll beat the sides they're better than. They'll lose to the sides that are better than them, and they'll probably pick up enough points to just see them, not comfortably through, but as you say, it's going to be very, very tight. It's going to come down to fine margins. But yeah, Roma in 10th, just above Juventus, which will be good for them, and to get above their domestic rivals. But yeah, 10th in the road, nothing spectacular, but still through to the knockouts.
Yeah, fair enough. You mentioned Juventus there, and in 10th place, I've got Juventus. Very similar reasons that you had them in 11th. I think they've got some fairly difficult fixtures as well. Again, being a team seeded in pot 2 is a little bit more difficult, but yeah, I think they've got some very difficult fixtures. I think every team who has United, their fixtures look more difficult because rather than playing 2 pot 3 teams, you've got a United where I think, well, United could win that or at least draw that, and so then it becomes difficult to get through. So actually this year, I think it's going to be really interesting because those teams that do have to play United in the group stage have naturally much more difficult looking fixtures because other sides will look at the likes of Poulton and Leuven, who they may play. I think that sometimes they're playing both of them, and in which case you look at that and go, well, that should be 6 points. And that's already potentially 3 or 2 points more than someone who's got to play Manchester United. So that is the thing that's separating a lot of teams in that mid-pack for me. So yeah, I've got Juventus in 10th.
9th then, and you've already mentioned this side, but I have put Atletico Madrid. I mean, again, a side who have started the season very, very well in the Liga F, and I thought in the qualifiers, that match against Herken was just absolute brilliance, not only to knock out a Herken side that have been very decent in Europe over the last few years, but to score an equaliser in the last minute of additional time and then win it in extra time, that's what we want to see in the Champions League. So I'm glad they're here, and they are playing well. I think that they have started the Liga F very, very well, and if it wasn't for Barcelona, they'd be top of the league, and they're back.
And Real Sociedad, to be fair,
that
also
is true.
started well.
But the fact they've got that record and they're still only in second is a bit of a shame for them. But they're playing well. I think they're looking good. Again, it's that sentiment of they'll do well against the sides that are lower than them. I think the games against the pot 1 sides for Atletico will be very, very interesting to see how they fare, because the reason I put them 9th ahead of the likes of Roma and Juventus is just because I think they're more likely to get something out of one of those bigger games, get a draw against one of the pot 1 sides, get maybe a brilliant win or something. But yeah, I think they're looking really good. They've done well to be here, and I think that it'll be good to see them get through to the knockouts, because as I say, that they're playing some really good football and they're in good form.
Yeah, fair enough. 9th place, I have also got a Madrid side. I've got Real Madrid. I think, Real Madrid, I would argue, are stronger than Atleti. I think they have had a difficult start to the season, though, in the Liga Ref, but that doesn't impact too much on how I view them coming into this competition, because they always do seem to find a way to compete in the Champions League. I think they've done well to avoid Chelsea and Barcelona in the group stage, so I think they've got some pot 1 fixtures that they can look at as at least games they could get a draw in. I think that their pot 3 games should be no problem, and they'll be fairly competitive in the other matches. So I think Real Madrid, they look really strong. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of players like Linda Caicedo. I'm just waiting for her to really have that breakout tournament, that breakout moment, because obviously she was excellent a few years ago at the World Cup, and she's always had glimpses of moments at Real, but it's never been consistent. She just needs one tournament really where she sets it alight, and then I think she'll be cast into a higher realm in terms of how people view her. I think that she's a fantastic footballer, and she could really propel Real Madrid. But it's a good Real Madrid side. I'm not sure why they've started so slow in the Liga F this season, because I think they've done really well in the transfer window to improve upon what was a very decent campaign for them last season. In quarterfinals, of course, in this competition. But yeah, I think ninth place. I think they'll just be focused on getting through to the knockout playoff round. I don't think they'll have any aspirations of reaching top 4, but I also don't think they'll have any fears of being in the bottom 6.
Exactly that. On to 8th then, and I put VfL Wolfsburg. Again, I think it's one of those where Wolfsburg are a side that we associate with being brilliant in Europe, and not dominating, but being up there towards the end of the tournament in most years now. But it's why I do think they have dropped in quality slightly. I'll put them 8th just because I still think that some of the individuals they've got will do enough in those bigger games to get points on the board. And I think that out of all of the sides that are going to be in the knockout playoff round, I think they're the one who will finish pretty high, because they've got a better chance of getting results against the pot 1 teams. But again, it's a difficult one. I think that for me, 5th to 8th could be in any order, and also I'll get into them. But it's going to be tight, but I'm expecting another decent performance from Wolfsburg. We know they usually put in some good performances in the Champions League, and I think that they'll do very well to compete. And as I said, it will be very tight. So 8 seems maybe a little bit harsh, but at the end of the day, they're through to the knockout playoff round, and that's what matters.
Yeah, at 8th place. Now, I will caveat this by saying I hadn't seen the PSG game before doing my predictions. In 8th place, I've got Paris Saint-Germain. In seriousness, I don't think they'll be as bad as they were in that game. That was a particularly poor performance, though. To allow Corbin Schrader to score a hat-trick against you doesn't reflect well at all, and I thought Mariotto was particularly poor in that game. But I think PSG will be better. Obviously, last season was a huge disappointment to not even make the competition. They're back in it this year, though, and I think they'll be keen to put right the wrongs from last season and re-establish themselves as a force to be reckoned with in the women's game. Yeah, I think they're a very decent side. I think that they have got some kind fixtures as well in there, so I think they'll do all right. I think they'll be in 8th place. So they have lost a lot of their star players from last summer, of course, with Katoto leaving. But yeah, they're still a very decent side.
Very different to my prediction of putting them outside the top 12.
True.
On to 7th, then I've got the other German side in Bayern Munich. Again, a side that we know have a lot of quality. They've got some great players amongst their ranks. They will be trying to push the top 4, but I think it will be difficult. I'm expecting some good performances from them. Last year, I thought they did okay. They looked pretty sharp against Lyon at times, and the other time they really struggled. But I think it's one of those where they're a good side. Again, they should find it pretty comfortable against the others, the sides lower down the table. But I think they'll struggle to break that top 4, which is why I put them in 7th. Again, it will be tight at that kind of 5th to 8th region. But Bayern, they're a good side. We know what to expect from them. They've still got a lot of quality, but I don't think they've quite got enough quality to be breaking into that top 4 and automatically qualifying for the next stage. But I think that it's one of those where they'll be happy with 7th. It'll give them a decent time in the knockouts, hopefully, and then they should. I expect to see them later on in the tournament. But as for the league stage, I'm going to put them in 7th.
Yeah, well, I've still got Bayern to come, but in 7th place, I've got AS Roma. I think that they are a very decent side. It's been a while since we've seen a Serie A Femeni team compete at the top level. I still don't think Roma are quite there, but I think they'll be able to pull off a few upsets at this year's edition of the Champions League. I think they're a side who will want to show their quality, and we saw Italy perform really well at the Euros, and a few of their players are at AS Roma. So yeah, I think they're a side who can do a lot in this competition. So I've got them 7th. I don't think they're going to win it, but I think they'll be able to get into the knockout playoff round, and depending on the draw, potentially make it through to the quarterfinal stage. But yeah, I think they'll get 7th.
Into 6th then, and I have put Real Madrid, and this one is, as you say, it's really difficult to judge with Real Madrid, because on one hand they have been really poor to start the season, some really difficult results, not killing games off and then getting stung, or just not getting going. As they seem to really struggle to just get off the mark and perform. They've had some, because they haven't been terrible, but they've just been really flat and not had some great performances. So that is a big concern for me, because the reason I put them 6th is because I still think they've got some good players. And to be honest, after they turned Frankfurt over 5-1 across 2 legs in the qualifiers, I thought this year was going to be like an incredible year for them because they'd signed some brilliant players. That Frankfurt are a very, very good team. You know, we saw them pushing all the way for the Frauen Bundesliga last season. You know, fell off towards the end, and that's why they were in the qualifiers. But Real Madrid were brilliant against them, and you know, won that game across those 2 legs really, really comfortably. And then they've got into the domestic season and fallen apart. But I still think in Europe, Real, they're a decent side. They've pulled off some decent results. And remember, they came to Stamford Bridge last season against Chelsea, and you know, made it very, very difficult for them. That was a really good game. That was obviously at the start of Bompastor's reign, and that, you know, at that point they were one of the only sides that, you know, made Chelsea look somewhat beatable. So credit to Real Madrid. I think they are still a very, very good side. As you said, they've got some top quality players, and for me, I think they'll have a really good show of it in Europe because they've been so poor domestically. I can't see them being bad in all competitions. I really hope not, because they are a very, very good side. But yeah, I think they'll finish 6th. I think they'll look pretty sharp in Europe and put on some good performances.
Fair enough. My 6th, 5th, 4th is, I think any of these teams could swap around. It's quite close for me. I think the top 3 are probably a little bit ahead of everyone else in my estimations right now, but I think this group just outside could be in any order. But in 6th place, I have got Bayern Munich. I think Bayern are a very strong team. I think they'll be one to go quite deep in this year's competition. I think that it'll be interesting to see how they get on again in those games against those pot 1 teams. But I think they are a good side. I think they'll be very difficult to beat. I think what we saw last year when they played Arsenal in the group stage, they looked really strong, and they just couldn't quite get through the quarterfinals. But I think they'll be a strong team at this year's competition. I could see them getting through top 4. I think they'll be keen to try and push for that, because that's obviously 2 less fixtures they've got to play, and it gets them straight through to the quarterfinals. But yeah, I think they'll be just outside in 6th.
Fair enough. I think we've got the same 5 teams for the top 5.
We do, yeah.
In 5th, knocking on the door of the top 4, but not quite getting there, I have put Manchester United. I think it's a simple case of they are a very, very good side. They were, you know, pretty strong in the qualifiers against some really good teams who, you know, have been in the, were in the Champions League last season and have been in the Champions League last couple of years. They're a very, very good side. We know the quality they've got. They've looked brilliant to start the WSL this season. I think the only reason I haven't got them cracking the top 4 is just because A, the quality of the sides I've got left, and B, I still think they will need to learn adjusting to European life in terms of, you know, the resting and the scheduling not being in Europe. But I think it's one of those where it does take its toll, and I just think in those games against the pot 1 sides, I don't think they'll quite get the results. I think they'll put on a good game and maybe get a point, but I don't, in no world do I see them winning both pot 1 games. So I think it's one of those where they are a very, very good side, but I just think balancing domestic and European football will be what prevents them from getting into the top 4. Obviously, I think that will come later in the season. Once they do get into the knockouts, it'll be even more pressure to balance out. But even with the league phase, you've got to be careful how you judge it. And I think they could potentially be caught out in one of their games by resting too much. We've seen that happen a couple of times in the Champions League where sides go too weak against a smaller side and they end up getting caught out. Man City nearly did it, against St. Polten. I remember that game. But yeah, I think it's one of those where United, very, very good side, but not quite getting into that top 4.
Yeah, fair enough. 5th place, I've also got Manchester United. We're definitely not going to beat allegations of bias towards the English clubs, but I think with United, it's more of a logical one in which because they are English, they have an inherent advantage at this year's competition. I think the fact that they avoid Chelsea, Arsenal and Barcelona as their pot 1 teams is very helpful. I think the fact they're in pot 3 is also very helpful, because while other teams in this competition have got to play United as their pot 3 team, United are playing other pot 3 teams as their pot 3 team. So I think that will help them. And I think they should get through those games. I think they'll be a very difficult side to beat for the top sides. They're a really strong defensive team. United's problems will come later in the competition because I have doubts over their depth. If they start to pick up injuries, that could be a problem. But I think in the league phase, at least, I think they'll be very strong. So we'll see how they go. But I think they should be, as long as they can stay fit, they'll be fine. They'll be very difficult to beat, and I think they can definitely grind out some results and take on some of the best teams in Europe. So yeah, I think they are definitely helped out by the fact they're English this year and that they are seeded down in pot 3. I think if they were in pot 2, it'd probably be a little bit more difficult, or at least the same level of difficulty as a lot of the other pot 2 teams. But I think the fact they're in pot 3 does benefit them ever so slightly. So yeah, I've got them in 5th as well. Right, so we interrupt today's video with a very special announcement. We are finalists in 2 categories at the Football Content Awards. Very exciting stuff. We need you to vote for us in 2 categories, Best in Video Creators and Best Young Content Creator. Harry, where can they go and vote for us?
They can go to the Football Content Awards Instagram or follow the link on the screen now, footballcontentawards.com/voting. I've remembered that correctly. Go there, give us your votes, and any support, any votes are massively appreciated. We need all the help we can get, really, because some of the people we're up against are incredible people in the space. The fact we're there is going to be amazing. But yeah, any votes, massively appreciated. So click on the link, get down there and go vote for us.
If that isn't worth a vote, I don't know what is. If you head on over to the Instagram, find the corresponding post with the awards we are nominated for. A reminder that it's Best in Video Creators and Best Young Content Creator. You find those posts and tag at the Women's Football Chat. Or the easier way is just to head on over to the footballcontentawards.com/voting. You can do both. You can do it on any different devices you want. So as many devices as possible. Go over and vote for us. Thank you very much, and back to the video. So moving into the top 4 teams, then the teams that will gain automatic qualification to the quarter-final stage. The order isn't particularly important, Harry, but for the case of this video and for appeasing certain groups of fans in the comments section and creating debate, let's run through them. Who have you got in 4th place?
Now, this was really difficult. I'm going to start with that to defend myself already, because as you say, they could be in any order. It really comes down to the results against each other. But in 4th place, I have put Barcelona. I'm going to duck now before someone comes for me. But as I said, it doesn't really matter. I just think it's one of those where if they're already through, and depending on how it all plays out, I think that they will win every game. Obviously, that game against Chelsea will be the one that I think it will come down to. And it's one of those where I think that Chelsea could edge that match just because it's in the league phase. And I've said this before, is that I think that it's one of those where it feels like the only time Barcelona would lose to Chelsea was when it doesn't really matter because it's in the league phase. So I think, again, with these top 4 sides, it's all going to come down to resting. Barcelona, obviously, their depth is it's still good, but it's not what it was, and I think that may be the problem. Obviously, I know usually that the way they do it is they full strength in the Champions League and then rest in the domestic league. But I don't know. It's a really difficult one. I've put them in 4th though, but we know how good they are. As I said, I think the only reason they wouldn't finish top or wouldn't beat someone like win that game against Chelsea is just because it may come down to, because of the other sides they've all got to play, the match may, the result of that match doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things in terms of, who qualifies where.
Yeah, 4th place, I've got Arsenal. Simple fact, I don't think they are incredibly strong. I think they'll probably just sneak top 4. Again, I said 4, 5, 6 could be in any order for me. I think Arsenal, the Champions League will be a competition that's more suited to how they want to play. The struggles they've had in the league of playing against sides who are very good defensively and who want to sit a little bit deeper and invite that pressure and then look to counter. That's where Arsenal's problems come, is breaking down low blocks. They should be better in the Champions League, where they will be the defensive team most likely. So I think it'll be interesting to watch them this season, but I think they're also helped out with the fact they don't have United. They can't play United, of course, so their pot 3 side is an easier tie. But yeah, I think they'll probably lose in their game against Lyon. I think OL Lyonnes will be keen to reassert themselves after losing in the semi-finals last year. So I think they'll probably lose that game, and that naturally then sees them below the other 3 teams in this stage, in this top 4. But I could easily see them not making the automatic quarterfinals, and someone like a Bayern or a Manchester United being in there instead.
On to my top 3 then. Now, I'm going to start by saying the top 3 is that when I did these and I threw all the results and the score lines into the league table, all my top 3 sides were joint on points. So this is, I think this has gone off goal difference is what this has done. But in 3rd place, I've got Arsenal. Again, as you say, I think they'll look very, very good. And for me, I think they'll win every game, and then that Lyon game will be the OL Lyonnes game will be that decider as to where they finish in the top 4. But bar that, I don't see them having any other problems. I think it should be 5 wins out of 5. And then, as I said, that game between them and OL Lyonnes will be a close one and will dictate basically who finishes where within those 2 teams in the top 4. But I think it will be that'll be a good game. That'll be a good test. And that's the thing for Arsenal, is that if they get the job done and don't do anything silly in their pot 3 games, pot 2 games, which I don't think they will, they should be okay. And then, as you say, I think they've got the quality. They're very, very good in knockout format and in these kind of tournaments. And I think they'll take the game to the pot one sides and make it a really, really good contest. So I haven't got any worries about them not making the top four. I think they look very, very good. Again, depth could be an interesting thing to see how that plays out, but I thought they what they've done, they reinforced their depth a little bit, which is very impressive. And the fact that they've got more winger options, and players like Katie Reid have now come in and stepped up as a centre half option. It just gives you a bit more, and there's not that risk of dropping points when you do rotate. So I don't see any problems for them. Third for the reigning champions.
Yeah, fair enough. Third place, I've got OL Lyonnes. Giraldez is back. They're playing some really nice football. They look an excellent team, and I think they'll be very difficult for sides to beat this season. I think the fact that, again, they've also managed to avoid those tougher ties of a Barcelona or of a Chelsea. I think they'll beat Arsenal, and so they easily could be top of this, but I just see them having a stupid result, like a loss to Manchester United, and everyone finds that funny because Skinner gets one over Giraldez, which doesn't feel possible. But so, yeah, I could see them just dropping points somewhere where perhaps they shouldn't. But I think they'll be very difficult to beat Lyon, OL Lyonnes, and yeah, I think they're a very good side. So third place, but I could just see them potentially being top and then dropping points in that last game because they know they're through anyway.
Yeah, exactly that. In second, I've got OL Lyonnes. I think, again, as you say, they're a very top quality side. They're playing some great football. And similar to what I just said of Arsenal, I think they could win 5 out of 5. And then that game versus Arsenal will be the decider. For me, it'll probably be a draw. And that's why I've got them identical level, because they'll pick up the same amount of points. But they're a really, really good side. They'll want to beat Arsenal again, for Arsenal knocking them out of the semi-finals last year. So that'll be a really, really good watch. But again, I'm not expecting Lyon to have any problems. And as you say, they're playing some top quality football. They're going to be hard to beat. And for these kind of sides, it's just going to be out, get the job done. And once the job is done, rotate the legs, keep the squad fresh, and then go again for the knockouts. But yeah, I've got OL Lyonnes in second.
Yeah, second place, I've got Chelsea. I think they'll probably go unbeaten in the group stage, but I think that will probably involve draws to Barcelona, potentially a draw to Wolfsburg. Again, that depends on where both teams are at. If Wolfsburg know they're fairly comfortably through, and Chelsea know all they need is a point to get top 4, for example, then I think we could see those two sides play out a fairly boring 0-0 or 1-1 draw, because there's no incentive for either team to push in that scenario. But I think that will come down to that game. But yeah, I'd see Chelsea going unbeaten, but drawing to the top sides. And yeah, I think that Barcelona game will be close. But yeah, it's at home. I think Chelsea could just nick a draw in that one. And again, there's no real incentive for either side. And this is the problem potentially with the league phase. There's no incentive, because finishing first or fourth gives you the same result, and the same then applies to finishing 5th or 12th. It's only if you're right on the bubble in 5th, 6th, 4th or 3rd, or like 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, that it starts to have a huge impact. Of course, these sides want to win every game, but if you have to overexert yourself just to get through a match, it's not particularly worth it if there's no extra reward. So I think we'll see quite a few draws in those bigger games, but we'll see what happens.
Yes, top of the league then, I've got Chelsea. Now, I'll be honest, this is simply because I think they will win that group stage match versus Barcelona, and it will be pretty much perfect. The reason I've done this is because I think with that Barcelona game, it's at home, and it would be the most Chelsea thing to beat Barcelona in the league stage when it doesn't really matter, but then go and mess it up later down the line in the tournament. So obviously we'll have to wait and see if that does happen. But yeah, I think simply because, to be honest, if Chelsea were travelling to Barcelona, I'd probably have Barcelona and Chelsea the other way around. I mean, I'm one of those people. I think I like home advantage. I like siding with the home side. And as I said, it would be so Chelsea to like go and play Barcelona off the park and then just go and lose them when it actually means something. So yeah, I'll put Chelsea top, but that top 4, as I say, well, I think they're all tied on goal difference, or they're all separated by a point or sort of goal scored or something silly like that. So I have no problem. I think all 4 of those sides will comfortably be through. They could be in any order, but for me, I think Chelsea will just edge that game, and Lyon and Arsenal will probably draw to each other.
Fair enough. Top of my group stage then is Barcelona. Unbeaten again. I think they'll draw with Chelsea, win the rest. I think the problems with Barcelona will come deeper in this competition when it starts to come to rotation, and if they pick up injuries, that's where the problems could lie. But for now, they'll be absolutely fine. The only major injury they've got is Caroline Graham-Hansen, who's going to miss a few weeks, but I think she'll be back in time for games like the Chelsea game. So, yeah, I don't think they'll have any problems in this league phase. As I say, the problems could lie later in this competition, but equally, by that point, January has rolled around and they may have some more budget to spend, in which case they could go out and build a very good team. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything to worry about for Barca yet, but yeah, that could come in the second half of the season, but they'll be just as strong as they normally are at this early stage of the competition. So, yeah, fairly interesting predictions there, but we want to hear from you guys. If you've got your Champions League group stage predictions, get involved in the comments down below. Let us know who you think is going to finish well. You've got any shocks to break through, any teams dropping out of the competition early on, let us know. Do you think that any of Barca, Chelsea, Lyon or Arsenal will actually drop into the knockout playoff round? Potentially so. Could any of them even get knocked out? Who knows? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you are new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to watch more, because that will then notify you when we upload. That, though, is everything from us today. If you do want to watch more immediately, there'll be a video on screen now for you to go and check out. But that is everything from us today. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.